This is Lecture 80 in the ABCs of Communism series, and as you know, this accompanies the books. But now, this is the 6th volume in the 14th edition of the ABCs of Communism, Bolshevism 2018. When you get your book, this will be on the chapter on slave stage in Sub-Saharan West Africa. I'm going to do 2 of these in a row this morning. This next one will be on the slave stage in Sub-Saharan East Africa. So we're going to cover the northern part of Black Africa in its entirety, and we're looking for the first kingdoms, the first slave stage, state-organized, class-divided kingdoms. We're going to start out with the prehistoric chiefdoms of Ghana. Now, you may recall that Dar Tichit is a Neolithic archaeological site located on the southwestern region of the Sahara Desert in Mauritania. By 4000 BP, before present, it was one of several Neolithic settlement locations along the sandstone cliffs in the area. Now, these agriculturalists adopted pastoralism into their millet and fishing mode of production by 3600 BP. This occupation lasted until 2300 BP, making it one of the oldest Neolithic regions in the western part of Africa, and that's why I've chosen it. Also because the Ghana kingdom that we're going to head toward is the first most important one of Western Africa. Altogether, 500 villages littered this region in what was then a savanna grassland of sub-Saharan Africa. There, the tribal agricultural mode of production evolved into a simple chiefdom, and that simple chiefdom then those simple chiefdoms then advanced into the advanced theocratic chiefdom stage, and from the ATC stage sprang the first slave stage kingdom in West Africa. Now, today the climate around the Dar Tichit region is very arid and hot. However, this was not always the case. Research has shown that the area used to be much more temperate during a time referred to there as the Nokchatin. During this climatic phase, the Dar Tichit region was temperate in the years 5000 to 3000 BP. Now, that climate had 2 seasons. One season was dry, and the other was much shorter and rainy. By 2500 BP, the climate was too dry for people, and they migrated, returning a half a millennia later, that is 500 years later, and again utilizing the same Neolithic seasonal lifestyle. The village sites were excavated by the archaeologist Augustin Hall, who named them Site 38 and Site 46. The latter location is found down in the sandy depression, and Site 38 sits up on a plateau. The faunal evidence at the Dar Tichit area is highly diverse. Cattle, sheep, and goats are the most common faunal remains at the lower village site of 36. Other faunal remains include crocodiles, hippopotamus, ostrich, gazelle, fish, and a very few representative bones of other animals. Now, given the amount of faunal remains that are from domesticated animals, it's safe to say that this Neolithic was heavily pastoral. However, there are botanical remains at the site proving they also had cultivation skills, and the Panacetum genus variety of bulrush millet is the primary domesticate found at this site, although the other botanical remains at these sites prove a broad spectrum of foods were used during the dry season. There are 2 settlement types occupied at different times of the year. The first type has heavy dry stone structures. The other settlement type features a scattering of archaeological material with no real structures. The heavy masonry would serve well during the rainy season, being up on the plateau, and the less structural area during the dry season down near the water. The Dar Tichit site had become an advanced theocratic chiefdom by 3600 BP. It has architectural and material culture elements that seem to match the site at Kumbi Saleh. Recent work in Dar Tichit, Dar Nima, and Dar Walata proves that as the desert advanced, the Dar Tichit culture which had abandoned its earliest site around 300 BC, moved southward until the still well-watered areas of northern Mali had encountered. Now, the sandstone escarpment of Dartachit in south-central Mauritania was inhabited by Neolithic agro-pastoral communities for approximately 1,500 years during the late Holocene from 4000 to 2300 BP. The absence of prior evidence of human settlement points to the influx of mobile herders moving away from the drying Sahara towards more humid lower latitudes. These herders took advantage of the peculiarities of the local geology and environment and succeeded in domesticating bulrush millet, and therefore we have these Pennisetum species. The emerging agricultural pastoral mode of production adjusted to handle changing circumstances. Social adjustment accordingly evolved, giving rise to simple chiefdoms. Some of these spontaneously evolved into ATCs. From AD 100 to AD 500, some of these ATCs, that is, advanced theocratic chiefdoms, autochthonously founded the earliest state in West African history. That is, the earliest kingdom, a class-divided, state-organized society. One can see that the dynamics of the Neolithic mode of production of the Dartachit region of southeastern Mauritania were initially scheduled to the seasonal availability of water as the most critical resource. This conclusion is based on the settlement pattern archaeology and the growth cycle of plants and known animal behavior. Which brings us to the political economy of Ouagadougou, W-A-G-A-D-U-G-U, that is the Ghana Kingdom. In 1000 BC and until the AD 300s, we have archaeological evidence of Ghana's occupation by tribal agriculturalists and pastoralists, some of whom became organized as simple chiefdoms. In AD 750, an advanced theocratic chiefdom of Soninke language speakers, one of the Mandi languages, then in eastern Senegal, northwestern Mali, Fouta Djallon in Guinea, and southern Mauritania, established the kingdom of Ouagadougou, or Ghana. The new Soninke leaders did not rest upon their laurels, but expanded Ouagadougou territory. The kingdom took control of a large pocket of land between the upper Niger and Senegal rivers, rich in gold. That acquisition meant that Ghana would become a leading force in the trans-Saharan trade network. Between the AD 800s and AD 1000s, the Kingdom of Ghana was so rich that its dogs wore golden collars and slept on plush carpets. Located within the present-day borders of Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal, medieval Ghana literally sat on a gold mine. The abundance of natural resources allowed Ghana's rulers to engage in years of prosperous trading. Good government and location led to the emergence of a very wealthy class of merchant capitalists within the framework of a slave-stage empire. In addition to the gold trade, a second important trade item in these West African kingdoms was iron. Iron was used to make farmer-herder tools and weapons, and tools were in demand for obvious production reasons, and weapons were used by some to expand control over others. The horse and camel, along with iron, were important in allowing rulers to incorporate small farmers and herders into their empires. State and class rule. Most of what we know about ancient Ghana, more accurately called Ouagadougou, comes from Arab travelers who encountered the kingdom of Ghana, and they were actually the title given to the Ghana is actually the title given to the Ouagadougou kings, and was used by the Islamic reporters to describe the rich and mysterious place they observed. This leader of all leaders was the king, also known as the Ghana, or war chief. His word was law. He served as the commander-in-chief of a highly organized army, the controller of all trade activities, and the head of the police. A bureaucracy consisting of mayors assisted in administration, along with civil servants, counselors, and ministers. Nevertheless, the king was always the dictator. Each day, the king assembled his court and allowed people to publicly voice their complaints, assuming they had some. Beating drums resounded throughout the area, signaling the assemblage of the court. Qualified citizens gathered to speak their minds, and whether complaints lodged or neighborly conflicts or cases of violated rights, the king listened to them and made his judgment. Such hearings were reportedly peaceful, unless they involved issues of criminal nature. Now, two of the most serious criminal offenses were the denial of debt and the shedding of blood. These crimes were tried by ordeal. That is, the criminal accused was given a foul concoction to drink, and that consisted of sour and bitter-tasting wood and water. If he vomited after tossing back the nasty brew, he was declared innocent and was congratulated for passing the test. If he did not vomit, and the beverage remained within, he was considered guilty as charged and suffered the king's wrath. At these times, attorneys for the defense would make the necessary payments to ensure the result, or if the accused was too poor, he would die. Ghanaian citizens were not the only ones that were put to the king's test. Inhabitants of its conquered lands were examined for their good behavior and loyalty. In territories where order and obedience prevailed and taxes were properly paid, autonomy was granted. However, in areas that struggled for independence or defied the king's laws, Ghanaian governors were watchdogs, and the secret police ensured that all was reported to the king. Class war. Ghanaian power spread internationally through trade. At its peak, Ghana was bartering gold, ivory, and slaves for salt from Arabs and horses, cloth, swords, and books from North Africans and Europeans. Salt was worth its weight in gold, and gold was so abundant in the kingdom, capital accumulation occurred through the gold for salt trade with the Arabs. Accordingly, Islamic merchants traveled over 2 months through the desert to reach Ghana. At customs, mercantile caps were subject to tax on imports and exports. The wealth that the kingdom acquired did not serve in its favor forever, however. Gold trade competition from other slave and feudal stage kingdoms took its toll. As you know from Volume 1, and from our review of the various parts of the world that have experienced feudalism, the feudal stage is always a halfway house between chattel slavery and wage slavery. In other words, feudalism is the intermediate stage of the servitude epoch between slavery and capitalism, and so it would be in West Africa. We know that the contradiction between slaves and masters, and the contradiction between workers and capitalists, can be expressed as a quadratic equation, with the former declining in value and the latter ascending. It depends upon what part of the world one is looking at as to the speed of transition and the relative condition of the oppressed. As we move westward to France, Italy, and England, the condition of farmers was better. That is, the condition of serfs was near slavery in Russia and the Eastern Empire, Eastern Europe. At any rate, in West Africa, efforts on behalf of more freedom for farmers and workers were at first weak and insignificant. Islam could be the anti-slavery ideological vehicle when its interpretation was by the mercantile caps, whose interest was in profit and accordingly labor peace whenever possible. In AD 1040, a Muslim group known as the Almoravids launched a devastating invasion of Ghana's capital city of Kumbi-Saleh. Islamic preachers had spread disaffection among the masses of slaves and the free but poor farmers, forced to compete with them for decent prices for their products. When Ghana reconstructed, it was under a new economic regime enforced by Islamic thought of this right kind. A history of the Kingdom of Ghana is found in the writings of a Spanish Muslim named al-Bakri. Archaeologists working at the site of Kumbi-Saleh have clarified this picture of one of the king's cities in the Kingdom of Ghana. Beginning in the 1920s, French archaeologists began excavating the site of Kumbi-Saleh, and that site was excavated in 1949 and 50 by Thomas C. and Monty, and by another French team in 1975 to 1981. The remains at Kumbi-Saleh are impressive, although the remains of the royal town with its large palace and burial mounds are yet to be delineated. Another writer, Al-Dirisi, says that the royal palace was built in AD 1116-1117, In that case, it was a newer town, rebuilt closer to the Niger than Kumbisala is today, and that may be the clue needed to expand the search for the royal compound. Anyway, to fund the state apparatus, which is to say, to pay the thugs, a tax system was created. Slaves, of course, could not pay taxes because they had no money, nor did the slavocrats that owned the state pay taxes. So a large part of the population was excluded as a tax base. Al-Bakri says that merchants had to pay the taxes, and by merchants he includes the petty bourgeois shop owners and mercantile capitalists. You will recall from Volume 1 that the most primitive form of capitalism is mercantilism. Mercantile profit is swindled from trade deals because the mercantile cap is the one who knows relative value of articles being traded on each end of the deal. True capitalism requires the homogenization of labor input by a group of factory workers at a factory bench, which Marx defined as labor power. When the factory bench is used to implement a system of interchangeable parts for the commodity being produced, we have the modern true cap system of labor power application. And with those comments in mind with regard to definition, in Ghana, one tax was on imports of salt and had to be paid in gold dinars, and another gold dinar tax was imposed on exports of salt. Other products paid fixed duties. Al-Bakri mentioned both copper and other goods. Imports probably included products such as textiles, ornaments, and other materials. Many of the handcrafted leather goods found in Old Morocco also had their origins in shops of the empire and were the nuclei of the capitalist production that was yet many centuries away. That is, true capitalist production. Regulating gold. The main center of trade was the city of Kumbisale. There the king claimed as his own all nuggets of gold. All others could have only gold processed as dust. The king demanded tribute in the form of goods, and preferably in gold, from various tributary kingdoms and chiefdoms on the periphery of the empire. The introduction of the camel played an important role among the Soninke people in Mali and Senegal, and as well allowed products and goods to be expeditiously exchanged across the Sahara. This rich and stable economy lasted for several centuries. Along the way, education became important for a variety of reasons, and the empire became a major educational hub. Slave stage Ghana had a central core region and was surrounded by vassal states. Al-Yaqubi, writing in AD 889 and 890, says, under his authority are a number of kings, which included Sama and and so extended at least to the Niger Valley. These kings were presumably the rulers of the territorial units often called Kafu and Mandinka. Al-Bakri says the king had bureaucrats and consigliors, mazalim, they are called in that language, at the throne when he gave justice, and these included the sons of the kings of his country. Now, Al-Yaqubi mentioned them in his account 200 years earlier. By AD 1054, Ghana had forced Dagast in the desert to accept its rules. However, powerful kingdoms such as Sila surrounded Ghana. In AD 1067, independent kingdoms surrounded Ghana, and Sila was one of them. And located on the Senegal River, he says it was almost a match for the king of Ghana. Sama is the only equivalent entity, he says, was a province that it was in the Al-Yaqubi's day. By AD 1240, Ghana's slavocrat rulers had intermarried with their class counterparts in the kingdom of Mali, and in that year achieved political unity. Ghana was absorbed into the growing nation of Mali, which would soon become the next great empire. Which brings us to the kingdom of Mali, M-A-L-I. The Soso Empire had been built around the city-state of Kaniaga beginning in the AD 1100s. The Soso also seized the neighboring Mandinka state of Kangaba to the south, where the rich gold fields of Bure were located. That's B-U-R-E. Now, in AD 1230, The Kingdom of Mali defeated Soso and acquired Ghana along the way. Malian forces were led by Sundiata Keita, founder of the Mali Kingdom, via his city-state of Kagaba. In AD 1235, King Sumanguro Kante was defeated at the Battle of Kirina. That was a confrontation between him and the Mandinka prince Sundiata Keita. This guaranteed the preeminence of Keita's new Mali Empire over Africa, and then the Kingdom of Mali incorporated all of Ghana, becoming the second largest empire in the world after the Mongolian Empire in Asia. From AD 1235 through the AD 1400s, the new Kingdom of Mali first seized the gold trade and then expanded it. This event marks the rise of a mercantile bourgeoisie to prominence. Simultaneously, the bourgeois classes seized control of the salt trade in Ghana and expanded it as well. The new Kingdom of Mali controlled the salt trade in the north and many caravan trade routes. Additionally, it traded extensively with Egypt and the copper mine areas to the east. What we now witness is a slave-stage society with a rapidly growing urban mercantile bourgeois class. This meant for West Africa that the intra-ruling class struggle we have been recording throughout the Old World slave stage was now inevitable. In the AD 1300s, the architect of Mali's economic expansion was King Mansa Musa. During his reign, his name became widely known throughout the world of West Africa and Arabia. Having adopted Islam, he made his pilgrimage to Mecca, taking 60,000 converts, 80 camels, and 300 pounds of gold tribute. Several great centers of Islamic learning were established in the Kingdom of Mali. Among them were legendary Timbuktu, Djenne, and Gao. Scholars came from all over the Muslim world to study at these places, creating a long and rich history of learning in religion, mathematics, music, law, and literature. Although many people in Mali maintained their indigenous religions during this time, Islam was well established throughout the kingdom. This brings us to the Kingdom of Songhai. That's Songhai. By 1000 BC, there were several different groups forming tribal agriculturalism, and they were of the Songhai identity. Some of them formed simple chiefdoms, and in the region of Gao, Gao, were the Sorko people who established small settlements on the banks of the Middle Niger River. Their homelands were in southeast Algeria, and they had come to live in Mali. The Sorko includes today's Zarma people, with more than 2 million speakers. Their languages form a branch of the Nilo-Saharan language family. Anyway, the Sorko simple chiefdoms fashioned boats and canoes from the woods of the Cailcedrat tree, that's spelled Cailcedrat. With these, they fished, hunted, and provided waterborne transport for goods and people. Another group of people that moved into the area to exploit the Niger's resources were the Go people, G-O-W. The G-O-W specialized in hunting river animals such as crocodile and hippopotamus. The other group of people known to have inhabited the area were the Do people. They were farmers who raised crops in the fertile lands bordering the river. By AD 100, these groups were amalgamated into advanced theocratic chiefdoms. In the succeeding centuries, internal dissension and conflict between the ranks over the increasing inequality weakened these societies, and the archaeological evidence is that there were two settlements on the eastern bank of the Niger. Gao Ancien was situated within the modern town, to the east of the tomb of Askia. The archaeological site of Gao Seni is situated around 3 miles to the east. The bed of the Wadi Gagaber passes to the south of the Gao Seni occupation mound, or tell, but to the north of Gao Ancien, or Old Gao. The imported pottery and glass recovered from Gao Seni suggests that the site was occupied between the AD 700s and AD 1200s. It is possible that Gao Seni corresponds to Sarna of Al-Muhalabi. Al-Bakr, writing in AD 1068, records the existence of 2 towns. Al-Muhalabi and Al-Bakri situate Gao on the west or right bank of the Niger. In the AD 1600s, Tariq al-Fattash says that in the 10th century, Gao was situated on the Gurma side, that is, the west bank of the river. A large sand dune, La Dune Rose, lies on the west bank opposite Gao. However, at Koima, on the edge of the dune, at a site 3 miles north of Gao, surface deposits indicate a pre-AD 1800 settlement. This could be the West Bank Gao mentioned by AD 900s and AD 1000 authors. This site has not been excavated. By AD 800, the Songhai settled in Gao but did not establish it as the capital until about AD 1200 years later, during the reign of Dia Kosoi. However, the Dia dynasty soon gave way to the Soni, proceeding to the ascension of Suleiman Mar, who held hegemony over the city and was a forebear of Soni Ali. Suleiman Mar wrested power away from the Mali Empire and gained independence for the small Songhai kingdom at the time. In summary, the Songhai slave stage had existed in one form or another for over 1,000 years from the time the city of Gao was the Malian capital of the Gao region. Gao was a city located on the River Niger, 200 miles east-southeast of Timbuktu on the left bank at the juncture with the Tlemcen Valley. Gao was an important commercial center involved in the trans-Saharan trade. In the AD 800s, Arabic writers described Gao as an important regional power, and by the end of the AD 900s, the local ruler was a Mohammedan. By the AD 900s, the powerful horse-riding Songhai speakers subjugated these incipient class and divided societies. All people in this area then began to speak the same language and became the class-stratified, state-organized Songhai kingdom. From the AD 1000s through the AD 1100s, the Songhai kings of the Malik dynasty ruled over land now in the nations of Mali and Mauritania. In AD 1350, in any event, the kingdom of Songhai then encompassed part of the kingdom of Mali, as well as land beyond to the east and north, and by AD 1190, Gao was part of the Mali Empire. In AD 1400s, the city regained its independence, and with the conquests of Soni Ali, who ruled from 1464 to 1492, it was the capital of the Songhai Empire. In AD 1464, the first of two great rulers in the kingdom of Songhai was Soni Ali. He made the Songhai perhaps the most powerful kingdom in western Central Africa. He seized Timbuktu and Djenne, which had been part of the kingdom of Mali. There, as well as the capital city of Gao, they continued to be important centers of learning in commerce. And Soni Ali was not a devout Muslim himself, but was sympathetic to indigenous religious practices. Most of all, he was concerned about his own ambitions to build a great empire. In AD 1493, his successor was Muhammad Askia. He expanded the kingdom, setting up a strongly centralized bureaucratic government with a new system of laws. The state apparatus of army and police became dominant, and unlike Soni Ali, he was a devout Muslim who used the combination of Islam and commerce to build his kingdom. He brought peace and stability to the kingdom during his reign. Songhai was one of the largest Islamic empires in history. Its base of power was on the bend of the Niger River in present-day Niger. In AD 1591, the empire collapsed after the Moroccan invasion, and the invaders made Timbuktu their capital. Around AD 1655, a book called Tariq al-Sudan, or The History of the Sudan, was written in Arabic. It provides an early history of Songhai as handed down through oral tradition, and the chronicle reports that the legendary founder of the second Songhai, that is Zuwa, dynasty, was Za al-Yaman, who originally came from Yemen and settled in the town of Kukia. After this period, there is a gap yet to be filled in by archaeology or newly discovered historical documents. Economic trade was stable throughout the empire due to the standing army stationed in the provinces. Central to the regional economy were independent gold fields. The merchants would form partnerships, and the state would protect these merchants and the port cities on the Niger. It was a very strong trading kingdom known for its production of practical crafts as well as religious artifacts. The ATC Songhai economy was based on a ranked clan system. Each ranked clan had a professional specialty. Some were metal workers, others were fishermen, still others were carpenters, and lower ranked clans were reduced in status, largely non-farm working immigrants with special privileges. At the top of the ATC were those who became nobles when the ATC made the transition to slave-based kingdom. In the kingdom, the ranked clans became impoverished freemen, including less impoverished, newly independent classes of traders. At the bottom were war captives and European slaves obligated to labor, especially in farming. James Olson describes the labor system as resembling modern-day unions, with the empire possessing craft guilds that consisted of various mechanics and artisans. Upper classes in society converted to Islam, while lower classes often continued to follow traditional religions. Sermons emphasized obedience to the king. Timbuktu was the educational capital. Soni Ali established a system of government under the royal court, later expanded by Askia Muhammad, with governors and mayors over local tributary kingdoms in the Niger Valley. Local chiefs had authority enforcing Songhai policy. Taxes were imposed on peripheral chiefdoms as well as provinces given autonomy. Bureaucrat officials administered each town. Under Askia Muhammad, the empire was increasingly centralized. He encouraged learning in Timbuktu, rewarding professors with large pensions. He established an order of precedence and protocol and gave back generously to the poor, giving social stability. Following the death of the Emperor Askia Daoud, a civil war of succession led the Sultan of the Saadi dynasty of Morocco to establish an invasion force. That Saadi is spelled S-A-A-D-I. Judar Pasha was a Spaniard by birth, but had been captured as an infant and educated at the Saadi court. After a march across the Sahara Desert, Judar's forces captured, plundered, and razed the salt mines of Taghaza and moved on to Gao. In AD 1591, the emperor met Judar at the Battle of Tondibi, where Songhai forces, despite vastly superior numbers, were routed by a cattle stampede triggered by the Saadi's gunpowder weapons. Judar proceeded to sack Gao, destroying the Songhai as a regional power. Governing so vast an empire proved too much for the Saadi dynasty, and they relinquished control of the region, letting it splinter into dozens of smaller kingdoms. The Songhai people then themselves established the Dendi kingdom. By 1600, the days of the great kingdoms of West Africa were over. And we're going to pick up their story in a couple of lectures from now when we talk about imperialism in Africa. And that brings us to a conclusion of this first of the northern lectures of Black Africa.